In the heart of the galaxy, hidden inside a giant ring-shaped station orbiting a blue star, the Galactic Academic Concord prepared to launch the most elite survival training ever attempted, the ultimate survival class. It was more than just a course. It was a galactic challenge, a brutal and unpredictable simulation meant to test the strongest, most advanced species in the universe. Only a handful were invited, each one carefully chosen for their intelligence, resilience, and strength. But among the sleek reptilians of Scary Prime, the eight-limbed thinkers from Vron Sul, and the proud crystal-bodied diplomats of Exultar, there was one odd entry: humans, a species from a planet classified as a Level 8 death world. Most thought it was a joke. To the Galactic Council, humans were unpredictable and strange. To some, dangerous. To others, just lucky. So, when the invitation reached Earth, eyebrows were raised both on the Council and among humanity. Yet, Earth didn't hesitate. They sent 5 individuals, each hand-picked from different walks of life, and leading them was Captain Elira Juno, a former Martian ranger known for her calm in chaos and clever survival skills during the dust riots. The shuttle carrying the human team arrived quietly. There was no grand entrance, no fancy display. Just a tired-looking crew with old gear, tough eyes, and a sense of quiet confidence. Other species whispered and laughed behind their tentacles and translator devices. They won't last a day, some said. Their species barely left their solar system 2 centuries ago. But Juno didn't react. She watched, listened, and waited. Inside the orientation hall, the grand instructor, a tall, feathered being with 6 eyes and a glowing translator stone, explained the rules. There were none. Survival meant doing whatever it took. Each stage would be harder, more alien, and more unfair than the last. Technology would be limited. Tools would be basic. Every team was allowed one personal bag and their instincts. No second chances. No safety nets. And no outside help. This is not a game, the instructor said, scanning the crowd. This is the edge of life. If you fail as a species. You do not embarrass yourselves, you embarrass your planet. The crowd stood silent. Then, a light flickered across the wall, and the first simulation was announced. Verdant Wrath, a lush jungle world thick with poison spores, carnivorous plants, and insects the size of dogs. It was an artificial world built in a sealed environment chamber deep beneath the station, mimicking the atmosphere of a real Class 7 hostile planet. Juno barely blinked. She turned to her team: Eli, a biologist from Luna Base; Harris, an engineer from New Detroit; Ren, a survivalist from the Siberian Wild Zone; and Amira, a medic trained during the Titan Plague. Masks on, weapons ready, and remember, the plants here are smarter than half the species out there. The team entered the jungle silently, their boots sinking into soft moss. A green fog floated low across the ground. Strange sounds echoed through the trees: clicks, chirps, and distant howls. The other species scattered, each team moving cautiously but overconfident. One group, a squad of golden-armored warriors from the world of Kroth, marched directly into a thicket, only to scream seconds later as razor vines pulled 2 of them into the canopy. Another team, the aquatic breathers of Hrotten, fell after breathing spores that shut down their nervous systems. Within an hour, 3 teams tapped out, signaling emergency extraction. But the humans? They set up a basic camp in a high tree hollow, lit a controlled fire using flint and dried sap, and sterilized the water using crushed charcoal and heat. Ren built a spore filter out of moss, cloth, and a plastic tube. Eli tested plant juices using litmus strips made from flower petals. Amira treated a minor burn on Harris' hand using fungus jelly and wrapped it with sterilized bark. At night, they took turns watching. They didn't panic. They didn't scream. They didn't even seem surprised. That's what caught the attention of the instructors. The alien analysts watched from behind mirrored walls. They couldn't understand it. Why weren't the humans reacting the same way? Why weren't they overwhelmed? The answer was simple. Earth itself had trained them. Every hurricane, every war zone, Every freezing winter and boiling summer had been part of their evolution. These weren't warriors raised in artificial cities or sterile bunkers. These were people who grew up fighting both nature and each other. In the morning, the humans found a collapsed team of crystalline beings stuck in a mud pit, crying out in harmonic frequencies. Juno didn't hesitate. They pulled them out using vines as ropes, wrapped them in reflective foil, and guided them back to the extraction point. The gesture wasn't ignored. The audience watching, the trial students, generals, and diplomats, started murmuring. A few began taking notes. "Compassion under pressure," one instructor whispered. "Unusual behavior in a death class scenario." The next challenge was already being prepared, but the humans hadn't even flinched from the first one. They joked around their campfire, roasting an alien root that Ren claimed tastes like burnt pineapple. Harris built a tiny windmill that powered a small heater. Amira taught the others how to check each other for signs of stress and hallucinations. They didn't just survive. They lived. They built comfort in chaos. They worked like they'd done this 100 times before. On the fourth day, the instructors closed the first simulation. Only 10 teams remained out of 30. The humans walked out with dirt on their clothes and calm expressions. Juno looked up at the main monitor as the results appeared. Their team had ranked second in efficiency, first in resourcefulness, and shared first in group cohesion. The room fell silent. Many of the other species stared in disbelief. How had the soft-skinned, warm-blooded bipeds from Earth, the Death Worlders, passed the first trial not only alive, but leading? Juno didn't smile. She adjusted her gear, nodded to her team, and spoke quietly into her mic as they prepared for the next stage. They haven't seen anything yet. Somewhere deep in the station, the next challenge loaded harsher, colder, crueler. But the humans were already walking forward, ready. The next trial came without warning. Alarms blared through the metallic corridors of the simulation zone as emergency lights flashed crimson, and a deep voice echoed in multiple alien languages, initiating second environment, icefall cataclysm. Without a break, the teams were thrown into the next phase, giving them no time to recover or prepare. The humans, like the other teams, were instantly teleported into a new simulated world, a frozen wasteland filled with shifting ice plates, howling winds, and deadly crevasses. The air was thin and sharp, cutting at every breath, and the snow never stopped falling, carried by hurricane force gales that made even standing a challenge. Visibility dropped to just a few meters. The temperature hovered far below freezing, but worse than the cold was the instability of the ground with every step. Cracks formed, echoing like thunder under their feet. The environment was designed to mimic the collapse of a planet's polar region after a tectonic upheaval, with sudden avalanches, radiation from exposed crust, and no shelter in sight. One by one, other teams began to fail. A large, slug-like species with heat-sensitive skin collapsed minutes into the trial, their protective suits freezing over and splitting. A proud warrior species with armor-plated hides tried to muscle their way through the storm, but lacked coordination. 3 of them disappeared into a hidden ice crevasse and were never seen again. Another group, relying too heavily on artificial gear, found their tech failing due to magnetic interference from the planet's unstable core simulation. Panic spread. Beacons flared red. Emergency extractions were triggered. Observers behind the control glass whispered nervously. The human team, however, moved low and close, using ropes to stay connected and moving with the rhythm of the wind, not against it. Captain Juno led the way, her eyes scanning for any sign of structure, her boots crunching softly over the icy ground as she remembered stories from the Arctic expeditions back on Earth, tales of frostbite, blizzards, and endurance that ran through humanity's bones like old instincts. They found a natural ice cave after 2 hours, and instead of trying to build something artificial, they carved deeper into it, creating layers of snow insulation, a method used in Earth's deadliest winters. Harris, the engineer, fashioned a compact stove using broken equipment from a fallen alien team. They had passed parts melted together to create a safe heat source. Eli, the biologist, used moss-like growth they found on the ice walls to create a source of hydration and minerals, identifying it with nothing more than instinct and field tests from old expedition training. Amira kept everyone's fingers and toes moving, checking for frostbite, cutting strips of spare cloth to insulate between layers, and even melting snow into a clean drink using body heat in small bags. Ren, ever quiet, reinforced the shelter with ice blocks, arranging them to break the wind. They didn't talk much, but their silence wasn't fear, it was focus. They knew what to do, and more importantly, they trusted each other to do it. The alien teams that had mocked them in the previous round were nowhere to be seen. By the end of the second night, only 4 teams remained active. The instructors watched in disbelief as the humans began rationing food, mapping safe zones using sticks and stone markers, and even constructing small windbreaks outside the cave to guide others. They weren't just surviving, they were stabilizing the zone. Juno spotted a blinking beacon nearby, a distress signal, and without hesitation, the team voted to investigate. They found 2 surviving members of a species from the molten moons of Quran, curled in a collapsed shelter, suffering from hypothermia and loss of coordination. The humans brought them back to their cave, wrapped them in thermal blankets, and shared their heat and food. The watching analysts were stunned again. This wasn't part of the competition. Points weren't awarded for saving others. And yet, the humans kept doing it. They're turning enemies into allies, one insectoid instructor muttered, almost with fear. By the 4th day, the ice storms intensified. Simulated tectonic shifts cracked the ground open, and glowing fissures of radiation burst into the air like fire from the frozen earth. The environment had become unlivable. The Concord administrators prepared to end the simulation early. But the humans had already moved to higher ground, built radiation shields using chunks of reflective ice, and created a timed schedule for safe exposure, switching positions like clockwork. Ren even constructed a crude warning system using tensioned wires and scavenged motion sensors that would ping if the ground began to shift. The other surviving teams watched them in silence. For the first time, the proud species of the galaxy saw humans not as primitive or unpredictable, but as terrifyingly competent. Not because they had better tools, but because they made tools out of anything. Not because they were smarter, but because they stayed calm when the world was falling apart. And still, they helped others. As the trial ended on the 7th simulated day, an extraction flare lit the sky. The 4 remaining teams were brought back to the observation chamber. The humans walked in last, their faces tired but steady, snow still clinging to their clothes. No one laughed this time. No one mocked. Instead, the hall was filled with a quiet, heavy respect. The results were posted minutes later. Team Humanity had once again ranked first in adaptability, and this time, first in environmental endurance and cooperation. The galaxy was beginning to learn a lesson they hadn't expected. These Deathworlders weren't just surviving impossible scenarios, they were changing how survival itself was defined. As Juno looked out across the silent chamber, she could feel the shift in the air. The instructors who once doubted them now watched with interest. The other teams, who had once looked down on them, now studied their every move. And somewhere, deep inside the command core, the simulation directors adjusted. The difficulty scale. The humans had passed another test, so now they would be pushed further than ever before. But Juno didn't flinch. She just tightened her gloves, checked on her team, and said quietly, "Whatever they throw at us next, we'll handle it. Like we always do." And with that, they waited for the next challenge, a trial no species had ever passed without breaking. But then again, no species had ever been like them. When the 3rd trial was announced, the remaining teams expected another brutal environment, lava fields, maybe deep space, or even toxic oceans. But instead, they found themselves waking up in small, dim rooms, each one separate. There was no storm, no wild terrain, no monsters, just walls, shadows, and the slow ticking sound that echoed from nowhere. This was the psychological gauntlet, the most feared part of the ultimate survival class. Unlike the earlier trials, there was no physical enemy here. The real danger was inside the mind. The simulation system scanned every team member's memories, fears, regrets, and hidden thoughts, then used advanced alien technology to bring them to life. The goal wasn't to test the body, but to see which species could hold onto their sanity, trust, and identity when even their own thoughts turned against them. For most species, it was a quiet kind of destruction. A proud warrior from the HFY race, who had survived 2 wars, screamed in terror when he was forced to relive his homeworld's destruction again and again. A peaceful diplomat from a water-based species sobbed as the simulation replayed her greatest failure, a treaty that led to thousands of deaths. Their minds cracked like glass under pressure, and one by one, the teams dropped out, unable to tell reality from illusion. But the humans, they were different. Captain Juno woke in her room to find herself standing in a ruined Earth city, smoke rising from broken buildings, ashes floating through the air like snow. In the distance, a child's voice called her name, begging for help. It was a scene she had seen before during the Martian riots, only this time, it was twisted. The smoke turned into hands. The rubble whispered in her ear, accusing her of every mistake she had ever made. Her legs grew heavy, her breath short. But then something strange happened. She laughed. Not out of joy, but from something deeper recognition. She whispered, "Nice try," and closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing. She knew this wasn't real. She knew her own demons too well to be fooled by a simulation. Meanwhile, Eli faced his worst memory, a failed experiment that caused a containment breach, costing 3 lives. The walls of the simulation turned into lab glass, cracking, flooding with smoke, alarms blaring in his ears. But instead of falling apart, he crouched and began writing formulas in the air, reminding himself of what went wrong and what he learned from it. "Guilt is a scar, not a cage," he muttered, over and over. Harris found himself trapped in a deep mine shaft, the ceiling falling, just like the day he lost his brother in a cave-in. But he forced himself to crawl through the simulation, bloodied hands and all, whispering to the memory of his brother, telling him he was sorry, but he would survive. Amira faced the sick and dying faces she couldn't save during the Titan plague, but instead of breaking, she worked through the horror, treating illusions as if they were real, repeating the oaths she had once taken as a medic. Ren, quiet as always, wandered through a forest filled with echoes of people who told him he was useless, that he was just a shadow. He didn't speak. He just kept walking forward. And that was what confused the simulation's AI. It tried to adapt, to change the illusions, make them stronger, more terrifying. But the more it tried, the more the humans resisted, not with denial, but with acceptance. They didn't run from fear, they walked with it. They didn't escape the past, they carried it. And they didn't shatter under guilt, they turned it into strength. After 48 hours, the simulation began to glitch. The AI built to test alien minds couldn't understand why this species refused to break. Instead of reacting with panic or despair, the humans told stories to themselves, shared memories of Earth, made jokes in the dark. The system tried to drive them mad with silence, so they sang. It tried to isolate them, but in the center of their simulation, the humans found each other. Despite being placed in separate chambers, their minds pushed through the barriers, drawing on shared emotions and memories to reconnect. Juno saw Harris in the reflection of a shattered mirror and reached through. Eli heard Ren's voice in a simulated radio static. One by one, they pulled each other back, forming a mental link the AI had never predicted. They sat together in the middle of a collapsing world, unreal but powerful, and began to talk about real things: the loss, the fear, the pain of being human, not as weakness, but as proof of who they were. The instructors watching the trial were stunned. Species that had survived planetary extinction couldn't handle the gauntlet. But the humans, flawed and emotional as they were, turned it into a therapy session. Some even started analyzing the simulation, asking questions out loud. Why this memory? Why now? What are you trying to make us feel? Their calm was terrifying. To the alien psychologists observing them, this was not just survival, it was mastery of mental warfare. The head instructor, a telepathic being known as Vothkiel, requested to enter the simulation directly. He appeared before Juno as a towering figure, expecting anger or confusion. Instead, she offered him a seat. "Trying to get inside our heads?" she asked. Vothkiel replied honestly, "Yes. But your minds are different. Not cleaner. Not stronger. Just harder to close." Juno smiled, not with arrogance, but something deeper: understanding. That's because we've been living with chaos for a long time. And we never tried to erase it. We just learned how to walk through it. With no more tricks left, the AI ended the trial. The humans were pulled out, tired but unharmed. Around them, only one other team remained, a species known for mind-linking and group thought. But even they looked shaken. The humans, in contrast, looked like they had come from a long meeting, not a mental war. As they stood together, watching the scores rise on the massive screens, the silence of the room was louder than any applause. Once again, Team Humanity ranked at the top. But this time, no one questioned it. Not even the other species. The humans had just passed a test designed to break souls, and they had done it by being exactly who they were: broken, strong, afraid, brave, all at once. As they walked out, Juno turned to her team and simply said, "They wanted to break our minds. They didn't realize we've already survived them." And somewhere deep in the shadows of the station, the next trial was being prepared, something even darker, more dangerous. But the humans didn't look back. They were already ready. The humans barely had time to rest before the next trial was announced, this time, without ceremony or warning. The room went dark, and within seconds, the team found themselves standing in a strange, colorless world where gravity felt wrong and time itself seemed to move in uneven steps. The trial had no name. No voice explained the challenge. There were no other teams in sight. At first, the humans assumed it was another simulation, another environment. But this place felt different, too quiet. Real. The sky was a swirling sheet of gray. The ground cracked like dried bone, and the air hummed with invisible pressure that made every thought feel heavy. As they moved forward, they discovered strange shapes floating in the distant parts of buildings, shattered machines, fragments of planets, all suspended mid-air as if torn from reality and frozen in place. Nothing made sense here. Juno gave the order to stay close, and the team advanced with caution, but with each step, their equipment began to fail. Compasses spun wildly. Scanners returned nonsense. Even their suits started reacting like they were underwater, though no liquid was present. Then came the voices, whispers that weren't heard with ears, but felt in the bones, speaking in familiar tones. The voice of Juno's father, long dead. Eli's sister, who had disappeared in deep space. Ren heard his own voice, accusing him of being useless. Amira saw visions of the sick calling out for help. Harris heard the rocks talking, saying his brother was still alive and buried somewhere beneath them. But this time, it wasn't like the psychological trial. These weren't simulations or illusions built by a machine, they were something else, older and far more dangerous. Ren, always quiet, was the first to realize it. "This isn't a test," he said, staring into the gray sky. "This is something they found and locked away." The truth hit like a cold wind. This wasn't a simulation. The Concorde had found something, a dead zone of reality on the edge of their galaxy, a rift where space and time had broken during an ancient war. They called it the Silent Core, and it was meant to be uninhabitable. The instructors never meant to send anyone here, but they had.